Short version, relax. It's good. He's cool, she's cool, she's cool. Some pacing issues in Act 2, but Act 3 makes a quick recovery. Unexpected old school New Line vibe, being kind of dark in spots, but also closer to a full-out family-friendly fantasy movie than Marvel has done for a while. There's a ton of stuff, like way more than half the movie that's been in none of the trailers, so I'm not going to do big spoiler stuff in the rest of this, but if you want a full volley of, wow, that's a lot of things I was completely unprepared for, just washing over you constantly midway through this, maybe take the 8 out of 10 recommendation and come back after. Okay? Okay. Maybe someday we'll have reached the zenith of meta upon meta, self-commentary Ouroboros of content management and storytelling that Disney and Marvel will be however many seasons deep into What If, and one of the episodic jumping-off points will be reimagining what the landscape of films, film criticism, and the discourse would have looked like for the ever-ongoing Marvel Cinematic Universe narrative experiment if the COVID pandemic hadn't scuttled, fragmented, and forcibly rearranged the entire schedule for how the studio's post-Endgame movie and TV projects were meant to come rolling out, with the question of where does this ride go now that the biggest battle is done and 2 of the 3 top guys have retired or died, now having hung in the ether for significantly longer theatrically than had been planned. The MCU has busied itself with filling in backstories, teasing new threats, beefing up the former B-Squad, and introducing huge new esoteric concepts, but now Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings effectively represents the first Marvel project since the beginning of this supposed new beginning to feel like a genuine fresh start from a new place, and not just because it's their first martial arts project.
I'm the immortal Iron.
Their first martial arts project. It's also the first straight-up origin story since at least the first Doctor Strange that hasn't been preceded by the main character being purposefully set up somewhere else prior, the most self-contained feeling in forever in terms of telling a smaller-scale action story where the conflict is an internal struggle between 2 groups with a bigger implication that isn't fully clear until late in the game. Like, the bad guy is a crime boss, but he's like the crime boss of about a couple hundred guys, and he wants to destroy a place with another couple hundred guys, at which point the this is a shared universe, so when things escalate, they really escalate factor comes into play. Overall, it plays out as a refreshingly different enough kung fu action fantasy that's content to send a charismatic new main character through a satisfyingly colorful hero's journey to meet his allies, face his enemies, and gain his powers in a neat and tidy complete package of an adventure before anyone pops in to be like, hey, welcome to the neighborhood, here's an edible arrangement, you seem like nice people, we're all real friendly here, so if you ever see a block party or quinceañera or, multiversal war crossover event happening, by all means just swing by. In the story proper, simu-Liu is Shang-Chi, a seemingly charming slacker enjoying a semi-directionless but not unhappy life in San Francisco with Awkwafina as his best friend and definitely not romantic interest Katie, but in reality a low-key runaway only son of Tony Leung Chiu-Wai as Wenwu, the fearsome leader of the crime syndicate the Ten Rings, who may also be an ancient Chinese warrior king, hundreds of thousands of years old, or granted longevity and other spectacular powers by wielding of mystical weaponry in the form of the eponymous Ten Rings. When mercenaries for his father come calling after a decade without contact, threatening not only him but his estranged sister Xia-Ling, Shang-Chi races to find and finally confront his past, with Katie tagging along whether he wants it or not, ultimately discovering that the history of his family and his own destiny are more fantastical but also potentially more dangerous than he'd ever imagined, ultimately leading to a battle of not only martial arts skill but emotional and psychological will, a hidden world of otherworldly power different from anything yet seen in the Marvel Universe, and honestly a significantly higher percentage of big, cuddly, floofy magical animals than I was expecting, one of which has wings, 6 legs, and no face, but kinda 2 butts. Anyway, its name is Morris and your kids are gonna want one. If I had to describe the energy of the proceedings without straight up invoking the last decade or so of live-action Chinese fantasy movies, because audiences in the US who've been watching the various Journey to the West or Detective D movies probably don't need me to tell them big chunks of Shang-Chi have a lot of the same aesthetics, and audiences who haven't will not have any frame of reference. I honestly would be tempted to say one should imagine an extremely high-budget, better executed version of attempts at family audience martial arts fantasy made by Disney themselves or other studios in the 1990s, though one would stress the difference being made here by tons of filmmaking skill and attention to cultural authenticity, not in the sense that anyone is supposed to mistake the mix and match grab bag of marvelized East Asian mythology as any kind of history or heritage, of course, rather the storyline and cast of characters, as realized on screen by the lineup of both fresh and veteran performers and director Daniel Destin Cretton, are all infused with a lived sense of tactile, three-dimensional humanity that feels rooted beyond the screen in subtle passing details that make the film's abundance of small-scale character-driven scenes feel more connected to the real world than anything in the MCU since the Oakland flashbacks in Black Panther. And you can tell that they knew these scenes were working for them because there's almost too many of them, leading to some draggy moments in Act 2 as it starts to feel like the film is taking a little bit more time than it needs, working the by now requisite Marvel Studios, our supposed villain is not exactly who you thought he was and or up to something entirely different than you might have assumed mid-story Swerve, considering this is a villain they've gradually been retroactively building up out of Swerve since the first Iron Man. On the other hand, though, it's in service of a higher cause, since it's a relief to know Tony Leung has been brought in to give a performance as a character, and an admirably complex one at that, and once things fall into place in terms of what the story is actually up to with Wenwu, it's very much worth it. He has a terrific hero-villain chemistry with Liu, who's also doing some really interesting things with this version of the refusing the call hero template. They both look dynamite in the fight scenes, and I'm not going to spoil with descriptions, but I really dig what they worked out for how the 10 rings are supposed to work as weapons. The rest of the cast is very game. I'm going to tread lightly around a few spoilers here, but Michelle Yeoh is unsurprisingly stealing scenes left and right from people. I know some folks run hot or cold on Awkwafina, but I thought she was a lot of fun here. You can see her arc coming a mile away, but it works and she plays it so earnestly. I feel like she's going to be hanging around the MCU for a while if she wants to. Meng-Er Zhang as xia-ling likewise gets a B story that starts out in a very really are we doing this again kind of place, but she makes it her own and it gets a great payoff. And the whole general vibe of the film just does a really solid job feeling complete, and yet also I would really like to see much more of just all of these people and all of this, so mission accomplished, one would suspect. Like I said up front, calling this an 8 out of 10, fun time at the movies, and I look forward to seeing everyone involved again real soon.